Okay, so it's similar to artificial intelligence.
But like you, I'm still enamored with the point that it is out there and that people believe so strongly and that so many people out there believe.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm not as allergic to it as some scientists are, because ultimately, if aliens showed up or do show up or have showed up, these are going to be very difficult to study scientific phenomena. Like, in fact, like going back to cats and dogs, like I think we should be more open-minded about developing new tools and looking for intelligent life on Earth that we haven't yet found, or even understanding the nature of our own intelligence, because it kind of is an alien life form, the thing that's living, in our skull.
It's so true when we don't understand consciousness.
Yeah.
It's true. We don't understand how biology's hard. Unpacking it and working it all out, it's a stretch. And they say too that our thinking mind is like the tip of a pyramid, that everything else is happening under the hood. But what is happening? But the thing so the typical scientist response to, are there aliens here, is that we need to see major evidence, not like a sketchy picture of something. We need some cold hard evidence, and we just don't have that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, but from my perspective, I admire people that dream, and I think that's beautiful. The thing I don't like, there's two sides of the folks that probably listen to this podcast. Is those that dream, I think, is beautiful. That wander what's out there, what's here on Earth, and then the other ones who are very conspiratorial and thinking that stuff is being hidden. And
Right.
It becomes about institutions.
Right.
This is your typical division between like those who believe that like there is intelligent life out there, potentially benevolent or otherwise, does not want to contact Earth because we are such a primordial species in terms of our mastery of things like technology, space-time, etc. And then there's the conspiracy theorists who like to believe in their like X-Files world, right, where they're convinced that the truth is out there, which I think they allude to very shortly here.
I have a funny thing to tell you about that. So one of my colleagues had a really good answer to that, and it's not me saying this, so I can say this, but he said, look, he works with NASA, not at NASA. He works with government, not in the government. It's kind of mean, but he'd say, trust me, they couldn't hide it if they tried. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Everybody
we're not smart enough or good enough. Not we, or not me, or not you, but whoever, to cover it up.
We as a species would
sort of
fuck it up at some point, right?
Yeah, it makes it sad because the people at NASA, the people at MIT, the people in academia, the people in these institutions, and yes, even in government, are often they're like just curious descendants of apes. They're just, they want to do good, they want to discover stuff, they're not trying to hide stuff. In fact, most of them would, in terms of leaks, would love to discover this and release this kind of stuff.
Did you ever watch this show called The X-Files?
Yeah.
Scully and Mulder?
Yeah.
And what I love, actually, I used to put it up during my talks, my public talks. There's a picture of a UFO, or what looks like a UFO, and it says, I want to believe. So that's where I think a lot of us are coming from. I want to believe. And it's so great. And one time I
want to rewind that, because that sentiment
exactly
is just
right.
like so
But
beautiful.
from my perspective, I admire, they're like just curious descendants.
I put that up. What I love, actually, I used to put it up during my talks, my public talks. NASA, he works with government, not in the government. It's kind of mean, but he'd say, trust me, they couldn't hide it if they tried. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Everybody
we're not smart enough or good enough. Not we, or not me, or not you, but whoever, to cover it up. It's sort of a myth.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Earth here
It
for a
makes
sec.
it sad because the people at NASA, the people at MIT, the people in academia, the people in these institutions, and yes, even in government, are often they're like just curious descendants of apes. They're just, they want to do good, they want to discover stuff, they're not trying to hide stuff. In fact, most of them would, in terms of leaks, would love to discover this and release this kind of stuff.
Did you ever watch this show called The X-Files?
Yeah.
Scully and Mulder?
Yeah.
And what I love, actually, I used to put it up during my talks, my public talks. There's a picture of a UFO, or what looks like a UFO, and it says, "I want to believe." So that's where I think a lot of us are coming from. I want to believe. And it's so great. And one time I put that up, and this
hide stuff. In fact, most of them would, in terms of leaks, would love to discover this and release this kind of stuff.
there's did you ever watch this show called The X-Files?
Yeah.
Scully and Mulder.
I love this sentiment.
And
So it's
what I
awesome.
love, actually, I used to put it up during my talks, my public talks. There's a picture of a UFO, or what looks like a UFO, and it says, "I want to believe." So that's where I think a lot of us are coming from. I want to believe. And it's so great. And one time I put that up, and this very, very nice couple approached me, really nervous afterwards. And they said, "Hey, can we take you out for lunch sometime?" And I said, "Sure." And they were like the nicest people. And just
Look
one
at
of many
this.
who has an alien abduction story. And the woman could never have kids. They were older, but they didn't have kids, which for them was a real source of regret. But it was because the aliens who had abducted her had made it so that she couldn't have kids. And she had apparently something implanted behind her ear, which was somehow unimplanted later. And they were just so sincere. And they're such a lovely couple. And they just wanted to share their story.
That's a real, whatever that is, that's the real thing. The mystery of the human mind
Right.
is more powerful than any alien, or I mean, it's as interesting, I think, as the universe, and I think they're somehow intricately linked. Maybe getting a sense of numbers. How many stars are there in? Maybe I don't know what the radius that's reasonable to think about. I don't know if the observable universe is like way too big to think about. But in terms of
We
when we
just
think
looked at
about
it
how
right
many
there, right
habitable
here.
planets there are, what are the numbers we're working with in your sense? What are the scale of,
There's the
Honestly, the
observable
numbers are
universe.
probably like billions of trillions.
of stars?
Like,
Yeah, you know,
kidding
in
me?
the UK, I think, I don't know if we do that here, but they will call a billion trillion, where you put like 1 billion followed by a trillion. Yeah, it's kind of weird. But here, I don't even know how to say the number, 10 to the 20. Like, if you know what that is, that's 1 followed by 20 zeros. That's a big number.
And
We don't
per
have a
sta-
name for that number. There's so many.
per sta-
I will say, what is it? It's called the Boat's Void, and I don't think that you can actually visualize it in this. You may be able to. If there's a way to sort of rotate. Oh shit! Oh guys, this is a game changer. I'm curious where it is. Maybe like here or something. There's an interesting stellar phenomenon called the Boat's Void. For some reason, there's just a giant void where there's no stars, and we don't really have any conception of why that could be. Oh wow, yeah, this is a game changer. Being able to explore like the galaxy and just see like Earth is in there, so we're kind of like, I hate to say center, but that's how we see the universe. That's how we're able to observe it, is look at us as the center point. And then kind of spread out and see. And as you go deeper and deeper, you can see these like ribboning clusters, right, of planets and galaxies. I should say all galaxies that sort of mix together and make the fabric of space.
star, I think we kind of mentioned this. Is there a good sense? There's probably argument about this, but per star, how many planets
Okay, this
are
is
there?
cool as hell.
Is there
We
a
don't have that number yet, per se.
Like, look at
we're not
this.
really there. But some people think that there's many planets per
So-
star. There's this analogy of
Again,
filling a
Earth.
coffee cup. Like,
We turn
you don't
markers
usually
off.
just pour one drop, you fill it. And that planetary systems, we see stars being born that have a disk of gas and dust, and that ultimately forms planets. So the idea, the kind of concept is that so many planets form too many. And eventually some get kicked out, and you're left with like
Right,
a
so
full
there's-
planetary
there's
system,
our
a
solar
dynamically
system.
full system. And so there have to be a lot, because so many form and a bunch survive.
I mean, that makes perfect intuitive sense, right? Like, why wouldn't that happen?
Right. Well, there's other
There's our
thoughts too,
super.
though.
That's like probably our super
These
local
big
group.
planets that are really close to the star, we think they formed far away from the star where there's enough material to
Of
form,
solar
and they
systems.
migrated inwards. And some of these planets migrating inwards due to interaction with other planets or with the disk itself, they may have cleared it out, like kicked other planets out of the system. So there's a
we're
lot of
just on the
ideas floating
edge here
around.
of the
We're not
Milky Way.
entirely sure.
in terms of our
And
spot.
what about Earth-like planets?
Right.
That's another level of uncertainty. That
It's a level of uncertainty. If we think of an Earth-like planet being an Earth around a sun in the same orbit, an Earth-like planet being an Earth-sized planet in an Earth-like orbit about a sun-like star. We're not there yet. We're not able to detect enough of those to give you a hard number. Some people have extrapolated, and they will say as many as 1 in 5 stars like our sun could be
Look at the
hosting a
scale
true
of
Earth-like
this. This is
planet.
incredible.
Wow. On the topic of space exploration, there's been a lot of exciting developments
pull
with
out from our
NASA,
solar
with
system now.
SpaceX, with other companies.
So that's probably like our local group of solar systems here.
Successfully getting rockets
galaxies,
into
I should
space
say.
with
Okay.
humans and getting
The
them
scale,
to land
guys.
back, especially with SpaceX. What are your thoughts about Elon Musk and SpaceX, Crew Dragon, working with NASA to launch astronauts? What's your sense about these exciting new developments?
Well, SpaceX and other so-called commercial companies are only good news for my field because they're lowering the cost of getting to space. By having reusable rockets, it's incredible. And we need cheaper access to space. So from a very practical viewpoint, it's all good. About getting people, there's this dream that we have to go to Mars, boots on Mars.
Boots on Mars. What do you think about that? You mentioned probes.
Boots on
What's the
Mars.
value of humans? Is that interesting to you from both a scientific and a
Truly
human
beautiful.
perspective?
Human mostly. I think it's such in our desire to explore. It's part of what it means to be human. So wanting to go to another planet and be able to live there for some time, it's just what it means to be human. Oftentimes in science and engineering, big, huge discoveries are made when we didn't intend to. So often this kind of pure exploratory type of research or this pure exploration research, it can lead to something really important, like the laser. We couldn't really live without that now. At the grocery, you scan your foods. There's surgery that involves lasers. GPS, we all use our GPS. We don't have GPS because someone thought, hey, it would be great to have a navigation system.
This is kind of what I touched on earlier, right? A lot of these technologies evolved out of our not just space travel, but just like looking out into the stars, whether or not it's like lasers, GPS, satellite systems, right?
And so I do support, but I really think it comes primarily just from the desire to explore.
Do you think something...
Honestly, Sarah is the coolest because she truly embodies like the spirit of Starfleet. That is something that I've always been so like attracted to in the idea of space exploration. Just the idea that human beings have a deep-seated desire to understand the natural world and to be able to look into the darkness of what we don't know, the unknown, and actually, explore and learn things and really, really better ourselves as humans on the way, and hopefully other life forms that we can reduce suffering for, improve the lives of. So I think it's a wonderful pursuit, and like Sarah's like straight up Starfleet, man.
There's a lot of criticism and a lot of excitement about Mars. Do you think there's value in trying to put humans on Mars, first of all? And second of all, colonize Mars? Do you think there's something interesting that might come from there?
I'm convinced there will be something interesting. I just don't know what it is yet. But I don't think having some commercial
crash
value
station,
or
yeah.
value in the metric of something useful is really what's motivating us.
So really, you see exploration as a
center of the
long-term
book over
investment
here.
into something awesome that eventually will be commercial value.
I do, actually.
Yeah.
I do.
So what about visiting... Okay, I apologize, but I mean, there's an exciting longing to visit Earth-like planets elsewhere. So what's the closest Earth-like planet you think is worth visiting, and how hard is it?
Wow, it is very hard. I mean, our nearest, call it Earth mass planet, it's orbiting a star very different from our own sun, an M-dwarf star, a small red star, Proxima Centauri. It's over 4 light years away. And we can't travel at the speed of light. We can't even it would take tens of thousands of years to get there with conventional methods. So the movies like multi-generational, this movie Passenger, have you seen that movie? Passenger.
This is what like a lot of like science fiction, serious science fiction literature on the topic of like space exploration really does dive into multi-generational ships, like ships in which we will have to propagate several iterations of or generations of people in order to get to our destination. So the people that take off will not be the people who land on Proxima. And that's just assuming that like we're not able to come up with a better way of manipulating space time, or not breaking the speed of light rule, but learning that there are ways to bend it or get around it. So who knows? But at the very least, if we want to get out here, it's going to take a while.
It's about a big spaceship that is traveling to another planet and everyone's hibernating. I won't give you the spoiler alert because one person wakes up and then it's kind of a problem.
Well, that's the idea too. It could hibernate
the
for a long time as
multi-generational
well.
ships, I
That's
mean,
also possible.
When you think about where we're headed as a species, maybe we don't send people. Maybe we end up sending raw biological materials and instructions to print out humans. It sounds kind of far-fetched, but already we're printing like liver cells in the lab and beating heart cells. We're starting to reconstruct body parts. I mean, the thing is, it is so hard to get to another
really
planet
interesting.
that this thought of printing humans or printing life forms actually could be easier.
Well, I mean, especially if you have like a hyper technologically advanced civilization. Again, to go back to Star Trek, right? Like they have the idea of replicators, right? So they can do matter to energy conversion. And so it's possible that if we sent sort of like on the Voyager space probe, there's like a disc that has like sort of like an intro to people and how to play the disc and blah, 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 blah. If we sent, more complex biological instructions, like, here's our DNA, here's like what humans look like and all of their different kinds, a civilization or someone on the other side could essentially, print us or recreate humanity.
Yeah, that's somehow so sad. To think of the idea that we would launch a successful spaceship that has multi-generational, like non-human life, and it's gonna
Lex, and I gotta say, I like knowing a little bit about watching Lex Fridman. Like the dude, he just wants to go on a ship so bad into space. He wants to meet aliens, and I dig it. I dig it too. Like hearing that, like you probably will never get to see anything close to this. It's a hard truth to hear.
reach other intelligent life, and by the time they figure out where it came from, human civilization will be extinct.
Wow, yeah, that is really
I mean,
sobering.
that's one. There's a tempting thing to think about. What are the possible trajectories? So, you know, Elon keeps talking about multi-planetary, us becoming multi-planetary species.
Ooh, there we go.
I mean,
That's cool.
Sure, Mars is a part of that, but like the dream is to really expand outside the solar system, and it's not clear, just like as you said, like what the actual.
Well, Eric Weinstein as well. Like a lot of what he says is in the same vein. Is that in order for us, sort of as a civilization, to continue surviving, especially past like the generations of whatever we've got in front of us, there will be a need for us to go to the stars and to find other places. Whether or not it's to like bring back raw materials to keep things going here, or it's just to expand the frontier and to find new worlds to call home. It's gonna be rad. Too bad we probably won't be around for it.
Scientific engineering steps that are required to take. It seems like so daunting. So like the smart thing seems to be to do the most achievable near daunting task, even if there doesn't seem to be a commercial application, which I think is colonizing Mars. But like from your perspective, is there some Manhattan Project style huge project in space that we might want to take on? And you've had roles, you had scientist hat roles, and then you also had roles in terms of being on like committees and stuff determining where funding goes and so on. So like, is there a huge like multi-trillion, we've been throwing the T word around recently a lot,
right.
but these huge projects that we might want to take on?
Well, first of all, we want to find the planets like Earth first. Like just even finding those Earth-like planets is $1 billion endeavor, billions of dollars endeavor. And that's so hard because an Earth is so small, so less massive, and so faint compared to our sun. It's the proverbial needle in a haystack, but worse. And We need very sophisticated space-based telescopes to be able to find these planets and to look at them and see which ones have water and which ones have signs of life on them.
I will say, and I don't think from seeing this video before, I don't know if Lex actually touches on this, but like, I think there's some incredible possibilities for artificial intelligence to fill in this space here, because we might not necessarily have the telescopes or even be able to like analyze the data in a way that gives us that information. So it'd be very fascinating to see if we could apply like AI and different tool sets like to the variety of data that we've collected about the universe, and using it to like help us find that life out there. There's an article I did on a previous video where AI has helped us map out like strands of dark matter and use it like pattern recognition to be like pretty sure this is like a large band of dark matter and how it would manipulate the corresponding galaxies around it. It's all very fascinating stuff. So I think that's a really powerful tool in space exploration that we haven't fully started to see actualize or see the true potential of.
Yeah, the Starshade project that you're part of.
Oh, Starshade,
Yeah,
sick.
probably the most badass thing I've ever seen.
Right.
This is
You know
sick.
what's
This is
interesting
very
you
is-
sick.
describe what
I
it
can
is
tell you about
first off?
Starshade. So what's amazing about Starshade is it was first conceived of in the 1960s. Imagine that, and revisited every decade until now when we think we can actually build it. And Starshade
Just blew
is a
through.
giant specially shaped screen. It is about, there's different versions of it, but think about 30 meters in diameter.
So you're blocking out the sun.
You're effectively blocking out the star
Yeah.
so that you can see the planet directly. And Starshade would have a spacecraft attached to it, and it would fly in space far away from Earth's gravity. And it would have to formation fly with a space telescope. So the idea is that Starshade blocks out the starlight in a very careful way. And it has to block that starlight out so that the planet, that is 10 billion times fainter than the star,
Wow.
that only the planet light goes to the telescope.
That's
Yeah, so
crazy.
in formation, meaning the telescope flies in, you've given a presentation on this, but like it would fly like in, this is extremely high precision endeavor.
Yeah, we had this analogy like asking a friend to hold up a dime 5 miles away.
Yeah.
Perfectly, like at the perfect line of sight with you.
Yeah. And the shape of it is pretty cool. I mean, I don't know exactly what the physics of that, like what the optics are that require that shape.
I can tell you. It turns out that if you block out a star,
I can tell you.
Imagine blocking out a star with a circularly or a square-shaped screen. You wouldn't actually be blocking it because the star acts like a wave. The starlight can act like a wave, and it would actually bend
interesting.
around the edges of the screen.
Right. That
And
makes
so
sense.
instead of blocking out the light, you're expecting to see nothing. You would see ripples. And the analogy that I love to give, it's like throwing a pebble in a pond. You know, you get those ripples. You get these concentric ripples and they go out. And light would do something quite similar. You'd actually see ripples of light. And those ripples of light, they're actually way brighter than the planet we'd be looking for. So,
Okay,
you
so
can't
they would
restrict-
introduce this noise that's
yeah, noise. And so this starshade, it's like a mathematical solution to the problem of diffraction, it's called.
Wow. That's
And this
so
is
cool.
what the first person who thought about starshade in the 1960s worked out, the mathematical shape, or one family of solutions. And the idea is that when the starshade, this very special shape like a giant flower with petals, when it blocks out the light bends around the edges but interacts with itself in a way to give you a very, very dark image. It would be like throwing a pebble in a pond. And instead of getting ripples, the pond would be perfectly smooth, like incredibly smooth to 1 part in 10 billion. And all the waves would be on the outer edges, far away from where you drop that pebble.
Interesting.
And so what this camera would be able to, this telescope would be able to get some signal from the planet then.
Yes, and it would be hard because the planet is so faint. But with the star out of the way, the glare of that bright, bright, bright star, with that out of the way, then it becomes a much more manageable task.
So how do we get that thing out there? We're still working with unlimited money.
Okay, working with unlimited money. We have some more engineering problems to solve, but not too many more. We've been burning down our so-called tall pole list. And then
What kind of list?
we call it technology tall pole. It's the phrase where you have to figure out what are your hardest problems and then
Awesome.
break those down to solve. So the Starshade, one of the really hard problems was how to formation fly at tens of thousands of kilometers. It's like, wow, that is insane.
What is this?
And the team broke that down actually into a sensing problem. Because of the Starshade, how do you see the Starshade precisely enough to control it. Because if
The
you're shining a
binary.
flashlight, you know the beam spreads out. So if the starshade has a beacon, an LED or a laser, it's going to spread out so much by the time it gets to the telescope. The problem
Wow, that's
wasn't how do
cool.
you tell the starshade how to move around fast enough to stay in a straight line. The problem was how are you able to sense it well enough. So problems like that were broken down, and money that came from NASA to solve problems is put towards solving it. So we've got through most of the hard problems right now. Another one was that starshade, even though it's looking at a star, light from our own sun could hit the edges of the starshade and bounce off into the telescope, believe it or not.
Shit. Okay.
And that would actually ruin it because we're trying to see this tiny, tiny signal. So then the question is, how do you make a razor thin edge? Like those petal edges would have to be like a razor. And what materials can you use? So there's a series of problems like that. So
Wow, so there's
yeah.
a materials problem in there?
Some of them, materials
Wow.
problem. And there's one. So we
So cool.
almost finished solving all those problems, and then it's just a matter
That's
of
fascinating.
building one and testing it in a full-scale size facility, and then building the telescope. It's just a matter of time to build everything and get it up for launch.
So this is an engineer.
Close engineering, yeah, it's
This
close.
is an engineering project.
It's
so-
a real engineering project. So I actually can tell you about 2 other projects that are not mine. I like to call Starshade mine because it was my project that I helped make it mainstream, where that line is constantly shifting. When I
In the interest of time, I want to skip to a really beautiful sentiment that she has about her book called The Smallest Lights in the Universe. It has like all of the fields. Then we're going to start wrapping it up here. So we'll talk about rogue planets a little bit and wrap things up.
Possible things. So you open your new book discussing Rogue Planet PSO J318. Never said this out loud.
Let's hold on. PSO J318. Can we find that? PSO. Sorry. J13. I don't see J13 in here, but this seems similar, so we'll just
Well,
go with it.
0.522. So a rogue planet, which is just this poetic, beautiful vision of a planet that, as you write, lurches across the galaxy like a rudderless ship wrapped in perpetual darkness. Its surface swept by constant storms, its black skies raining molten iron. Just like the vision of that, the scary, the darkness, the just how not pleasant it is for human life, just the intensity of that metaphor, I don't know. And the reason you use that is to paint a feeling of loneliness,
and
I
despair.
think, and despair. And why, maybe on the planet side, why does it feel, maybe it's just me, why does it feel so profoundly lonely on that kind of planet? Like what, like what?
I think it's because we all want to be a part of something, a part of a family, or a part of a community, or a part of something. And so our solar system, and by the way, it's sort of like when you treat yourself to like eating an entire tub of ice cream. Like I sometimes treat myself to imagine things like this and not just be so cut and dried. But when you imagine that, this planet's not part, because I don't want to give emotions to a planet per se, but the planet's not part of anything. It's somehow it's just all on its own, just kind of out there without that warm energy from its sun. It's just all alone out there.
To me, it was a little discovery that I actually feel pretty good at being part of this solar system. It felt like we have a sun. We have like a little family.
Yeah.
And it felt like it sucked for the rogue planet.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's just
hair keeps
floating
changing
about
the music. I
not
really like
floating,
this song. This
flying,
to play this song.
Rudderless. By the way, how many rogue planets are there in your sense?
We don't know totally. I mean, there's some rogue planets that are just born on their own. I know that sounds really weird to be, how can you be born an orphan? But they just are. Because most planets are born out of a disk of gas and dust around a star. But some of these small planets are like totally failed stars. They're so failed, they're just small planets on their own. But we think that there's probably, honestly, there's another path to a rogue planet. That's one that's been kicked out of its star system by other planets, like a game of billiard balls. Something just gets kicked out. We actually think there's probably as many rogue planets as stars.
All flying out there.
Wow, that's cool.
Fundamentally alone. So the book is a memoir. It's about your life, and it weaves both your fascination with planets outside the solar system and the path of your life. And you lost your husband, which is a kind of central part of the book that created a feeling of the rogue planet. By the way, what's the name of the book?
The name of the book is The Smallest Lights in the Universe.
What's up with the title? What's the
Well,
meaning?
the title has a double meaning. On the face of it, it's the search for other Earths. Earths are so dim compared to the big, bright, massive star beside them. Searching for the Earths is like searching for the smallest lights in the universe. It has this other meaning too. I really hope that you or the other people listening never get to the place where you've fallen off the cliff into this horrible place of huge despair. And once in a while you get a glimmer of a better life, of some kind of hope. And those are also the smallest lights in the universe.
Well, maybe we can tell the full story before we talk about the glimmer of hope. What did it feel like to first find out that your husband, Mike, was sick?
It was incredibly frustrating. Like, lots of us have had some kind of problem that the doctors completely ignore. Just that they kept blowing him off. It's nothing. Are they paid to just say it's nothing? I mean, it's just insane. I was just so angry. And we finally got to a point where he was really sick. He was like in bed, not able to move, basically. And it turned out all the things they ignored and not done any tests, he had like a 100% blockage in his intestine. Like 100%. Like nothing could get out, nothing could get in. And it was pretty shocking to even hear then that it could be nothing.
What was the progression of it in the context of maybe the medical system, the doctors? I mean, what did it feel like? Did you feel like a human being?
I felt like a child. Like the doctors were trying to water down the real diagnosis or treat us like we couldn't know the truth or they didn't know. You know, I felt mixed. Like, it's not a good situation if you think the doctor either has no idea what he or she is doing, or if the doctor's purposely, let's just say, lying to you to sugarcoat it. Like, I didn't know which one of it was, but I knew it was one of those.
What were the things he was suffering from?
Well, initially, he just had a random stomachache. I hate to say that out loud because I know a lot of people will have a random stomachache.
Yeah.
But so he just had a bad stomachache, and then, this is weird. A few days later, another bad stomachache, kind of gets worse. Might go away for a few weeks, might come back. And at the time, all I knew was my dad had that same thing. Not the same identical system, but he had these really weird pains, and he ended up having the worst diagnosis. One of the worst diagnoses you can get from a random stomachache is pancreatic cancer. Because the pancreas, like, you can't feel anything, so by the time you feel pain, it's too late, it's spread already. So I was just like beside myself. I'm like, this is like, wow, this guy, he's got a random stomachache. All I know is another man I loved had a random stomachache and it didn't end well.
How did you deal with it? Emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, as a scientist? What was that like? That whole, because it's not immediate. It's a long journey.
It's a long journey, and you don't know where the diagnosis is going. So anyone who's suffered from a major illness, there's like always branches in the road. So, you know, he had this intestinal blockage. I can't imagine someone in their 40s having that and that be normal. But the doctor's like, it could be nothing. Could just cut it out. You don't need most of your intestine. It's a repeating pattern. Just cut that out. It could be fine. But it ended up not being fine, and he was diagnosed as being terminally ill. Well, it really changed my life in a huge way. First of all, I remember immediately one summer, the summer when this happened, I started asking everyone I knew. I would ask you. I don't know, it's not my job to put you on the spot. Mm-hmm. I'd say, you have 1 year to live, or 2 or 3. What will you do differently about your life now? Lex, you have 1 year to live. What would you do? I mean, it's hard. I don't know if you want to answer
No,
that.
no. I think about it a lot. I mean, that's a really good thing to meditate on. We can talk about maybe how, why you bring that up, why, if it is or not a heavy question. But
It's very heavy.
I get, I think about mortality a lot, and for me, it feels like a really good way to focus in on is what you're doing today, the people you have around you, the family you have. Is it does it bring you joy? Does it bring you fulfillment? And basically, for me, of long ago, tried to be ready to die any day. So like today, I kind of woke up looking for, I was nervous about talking to you. I really admire your work, and the book is very good, and it's a super exciting topic. But then, there's this also feeling like, if this is the last conversation I have in my life, if I die today, will this be the right? Like, am I glad today happened? And it is, and I am glad today happened. So that's the way.
And that's so unique. I never got that answer from a single person.
The busyness of life, there's goals, there's dreams, there's like plans.
And very few people make it happen. That's what I learned. And so a lot of these people,
Oh, like you run out of time.
it's not so much you run out of time, but I'd come back later and be, well, okay, well, why don't you do that? And if that's what you would do, if you're going to die a year from now, why don't you make it real? Simple things, spend more time with family. Like, why don't you do that? And no one had an answer. It turns out, unless you really do have a pressing end of life, people don't do their bucket list or try to change their career. And some people can't, so we can't, like, for a lot of people, they can't do anything about it, and that's fine. But the ones who can take action, for some reason, never do. And that was one of the ways that Mike's death, or at the time his impending death, really, really affected me. Because, for these sick people, what I learned, he had a bucket list, and he was able to do some of the bucket lists. It was awesome. But he got sick pretty quickly. So if you do only have a year to live, it's ironic, because you can't do the things you wanted to do because you get too sick too fast.
What were the bucket list things for you that you realized, like, what am I doing with my life?
That was the major concept of him. After he died, I didn't know. Like, I was just lost, because when something that profound happens, all the things I was doing, most of the things I was doing were just meaningless. It was so tough to find an answer for that. And that's when I settled on, I'm going to devote the rest of my life to trying to find another Earth, and to find out, that we're not alone.
What is that longing for connection with others? What's that about? What do you think? Why is that so full of meaning?
I don't know why. I mean, I think it's how we're hardwired. Like, one of my friends some time ago, actually when my dad died, he never heard someone say this before, but he's like, Sarah, why are we evolved to take death so harshly? Like, what kind of society would we be if we just didn't care people died? Like, that would be a very different type of world. How would we as a species have got to where we are? So I think that is tied hand in hand with why do we seek connection? It's just that what we were talking about before, that subconsciousness that we don't understand.
Yeah, coupled, the other side, the flip side of the coin of connection and love is a fear of loss. It's like that was, again, I don't know. It's what makes you appreciate the moment is that the thing ends.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard one. The thing ends, but
what?
And it's hard to not, you wouldn't want to limit. Like, it's like my dog, who I love so much, I'll start to cry. Like, I can't think about the end. I know he'll age much faster than I will, and someday it will end, right? But it's too sad to think of. But should I not have got a dog?
Right.
Should I have not brought this sort of joy into my life because I know it won't be forever? It's
well, there's a philosopher in Becker who wrote a book, Denial of Death. I just and Warm of the Cores, and there's another book that talks about terror management theory. Sheldon Solomon, I just talked to him a few weeks ago. He's a brilliant philosopher, psychologist. That their theory, whatever you make of it, is that the fear of death is at the core of everything we do. So like you're that you think you don't think about the mortality of your dog, but you do, and that's what makes the experience rich. Like there's this kind of like in the shadows lurks the knowledge that this won't last forever, and that makes every moment just special in some kind of weird way that the moments are special for us humans. I mean, sorry to use romantic terms like love, but what did you learn about love from losing it, from losing your husband?
Well, I learned
Tough
to love
question.
the things I have more. I learned to love the people that I have more, and to not let the little things bother me as much.
What about the rediscovery or like the discovery of the little lights in the darkness? So the book, I think you brilliantly describe the dark parts of your journey, but maybe can you talk about how you were able to rediscover the lights?
They came in many ways, and the way I like to think about it is like grief is an ocean, with tiny islands of the little like the little lights, and eventually that ocean gets smaller and smaller, and the islands like become continents with lakes.
Yeah.
So initially it'd be like the children laughing one day, or my colleagues at work who rallied around me and would take me away from my darkness to work on a project. Later on, it turned out to be a group of women my age, all widows, all with children, in my town. And it would be, even though it was a bit morose getting together, still very joyful at the same time.
What was the journey of rediscovering love like for you? So refinding, I mean, is there some, by way of advice or insight about how to rediscover the beauty of life?
Of life, it's a hard one. I think you just have to stay open to being positive and just to get out there.
Do you still think about your own mortality? So you mentioned that was a thing that you would meditate on as a question when it was right there in front of you, but do you still think about it?
I think I will after talking to you. But no, it's not really something I think about. I mean, I do think about the search for another Earth, and will I get there? Will I be able to conclude my search, and is there one? Like as time goes by, that window to solve that problem gets smaller.
Huh.
So,
What would bring you, again, I apologize if this makes concrete the fact that life is finite, but what would bring you joy if we discovered while you're still here?
what would bring me joy? Finding another Earth, an Earth-like planet around a sun-like star, knowing that there's at least one or more out there, being able to see water, that it has signs of water, and being able to see some gases that don't
look
belong.
at that.
So I know that the search will continue after I'm gone, enough to fuel the next generation.
So there's
So
some,
just like
there's some
opening
kind
the
of
door.
like,
There's like
this
this glimmer
planet
of
is
hope.
like off-gassing or exhausting.
What do you think it will take to realize that?
from
we've
its
talked
traveling
about all
around
these
this
interesting
star?
projects,
It's such a
Starshade
cool
especially.
phenomenon.
But is there something that you're particularly kind of hopeful about in the next 10, 20 years that might give us that exact glimmer of hope that there's Earth-like planets out there?
I stand behind Starshade in all cases. So,
Whoa.
but there is this other kind of field that everyone is involved in, because Starshade is hard.
Sorry,
Earths are
pushed the
hard.
wrong button. Classic.
But there's another category of planet star type that's easier, and these are planets orbiting small red dwarf stars. They're not Earth-like at all. Think like Earth cousin instead of Earth twin. But there's a chance that we might establish that some of those have water and signs of life on them. That's nearer term than Starshade, and we're all working hard on that too.
Let me ask, by way of recommendations, I think a lot of people are curious about this kind of stuff. What 3 books, technical or fiction or philosophical or anything really, had an impact on your life, and or you would recommend, besides of course your book?
There's one book I wish everyone could read. I'm not sure if you've read it. It's actually a children's book, like a young adult book. It's called The Giver.
Yes, I
And it is the book
Whoa.
that kids in school read now. And I only...
sorry, that's wow. 'Cause sorry, that caught me off guard. So when I first came to this country, I didn't speak much. It's really what made me. It had a profound impact on my life,
Wow.
and at a really important moment, because they give it to kids. Like I think
like middle school, I think, or
eighth
maybe
grade,
elementary.
yeah, something like that.
Well, I'm so surprised you've even heard of this book.
Yeah,
Wow,
so
it's
they
just
give it,
amazing.
but like it's the value of giving the right book to a person at the right time.
Wow.
I was because it's very accessible.
Do we want to share what the story is without spoiling it?
Yeah, you can without spoiling, right?
Well, it
yeah.
follows this boy in this very utopic society that's like perfect. It's been all clean cut and made perfect, actually. And as he kind of comes of age, he starts realizing something's wrong with his world. And so it's part of that question, are we going to evolve as I mean, this isn't what's there, but it made me wonder, are we evolving to a better place? Is there a day when we can eliminate, poverty and hunger and crime and sickness? In this book, they pretty much have in the society that the boy's in. And sort of follows him, and he becomes the chosen one to be like a receiver. The giver's the old wise man who retains some of the harshness of the outside world so that he can advise the people. As the sort of boy comes of age and is chosen for this special role, he finds the world isn't what he expects. And I don't know about you, but it was so profound for me because it jolts you out of reality. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm just going with the flow with my society. How do I think outside the box and the confines of my society, which surely carries negative things with it that we don't realize today?
Yeah, and also, and the flip side of that is, if you do take a step outside the box on occasion, what's the psychological burden of that? Like, is that a step you want to take? Is that a journey you want to take? What is that life like?
I don't know. I felt like from the book you have to take it. I found from the book. I never thought, like, now that you're saying it, I see what you're saying. The burden is huge, but I always felt like the answer is yes. You absolutely want to know what's outside, but you can't do that if you're it's hard to be objective about your own reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very human instinct, but it also, the book kind of shows that it has an effect on you. It's a really interesting question about our society taking a step out.
All right, guys, it has been an absolutely lovely stream exploring space with you tonight, just kind of flying around listening to Lex and Sarah talk. Again, I did did an episode with them ages ago, but it was nice to do it again so I can actually save it this time so it doesn't get deleted off Twitch. For those of you who stuck around, peace, love, respect. Thank you so much. I'm the son of Moog, signing off. Everyone, please have a lovely evening.